Call the regular session of our town council to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for
all. Okay. Well, just by a few words of background, normally we do not have town council meetings in August, but we had arranged to have a work session tonight, which will follow this discussion of your variance, in order to review upcoming issues regarding multifamily housing that could potentially come into the town. But we thought we would take advantage because we're having the work session and because we know that when people apply for variances, they like to have them taken up promptly rather than deferred. We would take the opportunity to hear you tonight rather than postpone it till September 10th, which is otherwise when we would be waiting to hear from you. So we're pleased to take it up this evening. Ron, do you want to start off with an outline of the process?
Yes. So this is the variance application regarding 7001 Meadow Lane. The requested variance is for a drainage pipe that would pass underneath the sidewalk. Town regulations prohibit private improvements under the sidewalk. Therefore, a variance is required. If the variance is granted, a right-of-way use agreement would be needed from the town and from the county. The county's agreement would authorize the connection to that county system. The applicant should please note that we'll follow the following procedure. First, you can present your case. Please note that the council has had the opportunity to review the materials in advance, so you don't need to restate everything in there, but please feel free to address what you want. Then we'll move to council questions. After that, I don't see anybody there now, but if there was anyone else in the town hall or online that wanted to make a comment or ask a question, they could do so. After that, you'd be given an opportunity for rebuttal. The record will then close and the council will deliberate, entertain a motion directing me to prepare a decision, either approving or denying the request. Please note that if it's approved, it's not final until it's written up, and that usually takes about a week to 10 days. Please identify yourself by name and address before speaking and wait until you're recognized by the chair. But it looks like it's only the two of you, so this will be an easy hearing. So with that, please continue.
Okay. Thank you. Dave, is there anything you want to start off with? Okay. Great. All right. I'll turn it over to the applicants, please.
Oh, Mayor Rush, I should note the town did receive one letter in support of the request, and that's in the record.
We've seen that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Michelle Gervin of 7001 Meadow Lane, and my husband, John Siegel, is also here. I'll just give you an overview of why we're requesting this variance, and he's going to share a video. So first, I just wanted to thank you for considering considering our variance at this working meeting. It's much appreciated to expedite this process. So we're requesting a variance, as you heard, to run a drainage pipe under the sidewalk and direct it into the storm drain. And the reason we're asking to do this is because during severe storms, we get an inordinate amount of water from neighboring properties draining onto our property due to the topography of the land. And we've done several mitigating efforts, French drain around our property. Well, that was done before us by the previous owners, sump pumps. We've added extra French drains, lots of extra drainage. One alternative we would have had would be to put in a drain and drain it like basically onto our front lawn. But I think that doesn't serve the community well. Then we would get a large gush of water onto the sidewalk instead of directing it underneath into the storm drain. And so basically that's what we're requesting. And John is just going to show you a brief video of the drainage situation to show you the impact of the water on our property.
Well, I would show that video if I were authorized to share my screen. So Can I request that?
Yes, you can.
Ken, I saw your request, but I'm gonna have to let you just do it individually because we've had some problems with allowing everybody to do it before.
Oh,
Hold on just
okay.
a second.
Well, all right.
Let me see. Hold on just one second.
I just made it available real quick for him to do it. You should be able to share.
Okay, so I should be able to do this. Let me try to share this. Let's see.
Why don't you request it again, Jay, if you could?
Okay.
I know how to do it here.
I am sharing. Okay, so we want to see this.
Can you make
Let me enlarge
that
this
bigger?
one. Yes, I'm working on it.
great.
Here we go. So
I was gonna
this is
say.
the worst it's ever been.
Do you sell tickets for people to see this?
This is from 2022. And as you see, it comes in from different properties next to ours and comes right up near our house. And that was the sign that we were going to have a flood in our basement. So
Right.
that's why we're requesting this variance.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any questions from council?
I have a few questions.
Sure.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the preparation of the materials. These are kind of questions more for Dave and the town versus the applicant. So how often is this done, or is this the first time that there would be the potential for a pipe to be put underneath a sidewalk?
So there are many pipes that run underneath the sidewalk in the town. Many of them run into the back of storm drain systems. More of them run through or pop through the curb. So, I mean, it's done very frequently. This did not require a variance until last year, when the town changed its ordinance to be more restrictive as far as, you know, the use of the right of way. And
Right.
I know it was sort of dealing with the electrical vehicle chargers. And so the ordinance was changed at that time to, I guess, give it more scrutiny. But it is very common, and it's generally a good practice to have it not drain onto the sidewalk and to get it all the way to the street if you can.
Exactly. So this pipe, given the, excuse me, given the video that we just saw, I don't know if that was considered to be a 10-year storm, a 100-year storm. Is the pipe such that it should clear out their backyard, if you will, and everything would, like, what have they said about it? Because I looked in the materials and I couldn't find that particular piece of information.
Yeah, they're proposing an 8-inch pipe, which is fairly large. You know, how quickly it conveys the water depends on the size of the inlet. But it certainly will be able to move a large volume of water into the storm drain. And even if it becomes overwhelmed, it will be able to drain it more quickly. So it'll clear more quickly than a smaller pipe.
Take the standard 20 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, it
Okay.
just depends on the volume and the rate of the rainfall.
And I couldn't tell from the landscaping in their backyard, but I didn't see any trees that would potentially have root systems that would go into this eventually into this pipe in the future. But just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, it's proposed as a PVC pipe. So it's sort of an enclosed pipe, and generally trees will grow around it. You know, over time, if roots grow to be very large, you know, there can be intrusions, or as the pipe gets old, you know, it might develop some problems. But that's really a matter of, you know, replacing it at that point.
Okay.
But it should last for a very long time.
That's all I had. Thank you.
One question. I see your hand is raised, Michelle. Are you sure the pipe is large enough?
If I can answer that, yes, we did have the town water management consultant out twice, actually, in, I believe, 2022 and again this year. And he did say this pipe, this size, I don't know if it's like explicitly in his report, but he was looking for handling once every 100-year storm. And so, you know, storms are getting worse. There's a trend over 100 years, but I think once over the past 100 years, this pipe is meant to handle that.
Right. Okay. Good. Thank you. Was there something else you wanted to add? No, that was it. Okay. Are there any comments from the audience? Anybody on screen? Okay. Is there anything else that the applicants wish to say? Don't think so.
Well,
All right. Please.
I mean, I just feel I should add, since there was a question about trees, I feel obliged to mention that there's a tree in the front yard on our neighbor's property, which our contractor says might have to go because of this project, and we've submitted a separate tree removal application, and the arborist has been out to look at it. So I just don't want you to think we were hiding anything about trees.
Yeah, and that's also mentioned in our application.
Okay. I hadn't focused on it. How big is that tree?
Yeah, it's about a 10-inch red maple. It actually has it's very close to both of the houses, and it has a codominant leader. So
On the side of Tina Copeland's house?
it's on the opposite side.
Okay.
So
It's on Carol Sugarman and Mark Peskin's property.
Hellish.
Okay.
so
So
yeah,
that's a
Tolbert and
separate
I-
application.
Yes.
yeah, Tolbert actually just gave it to me to approve today.
So he's going to approve it.
So yeah, we granted it. Like I said, the tree is hazardous because of codominant leader and sort of the proximity to the adjoining
Sounds good.
houses.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And then if we're talking about trees, there's also a public tree sort of to the right side of the storm drain inlet. So the proposed pipe is intended to go into the left side of that inlet. So there's sufficient room to get the pipe in without any tree protection needed.
Good. Okay. All right. Any other comments from my colleagues? Can I entertain a motion?
I'll move approval of the variance.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Unanimously approved. Good luck in draining the. I was going to say, you're going to be able to drain the swamp and truly do it.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very
All
much.
right. Great. All right. Thank you. Okay. I adjourn the regular meeting. Now call the work session into session. Thank you very much for everyone joining tonight on the time when normally we don't meet. And Eric, thank you for joining wherever you are, and Deedon for being here tonight. The genesis of this work session is really because of the very rapid action that the council seems to want to take in regard to the Subdivision Regulation Authority, SRA, which is the companion piece of legislation to the ZTA, which essentially the SRA is going to control how many lots could be combined. And when we found out that there's going to be a public hearing on this on September 16th, we want the town to be well prepared. It became necessary, obviously, for us to get engaged and think this through, and did not want to wait until our normal meeting on September 10th, which would not give us enough time to do a thorough review, obviously, as prep for the testimony that we'd like to give. So we settled on this course of action. In general, there are two topics that I'd like us to cover tonight. Both are important, but one is urgent. The SRA is urgent. The other topic, though, which I'd like to spend some time on just as a matter of introduction and a review for the benefit of the council, is basically beginning to take on board the impact of the ZTA in terms of permitting multifamily housing. And we know that our town ordinances must be complied with up to 4 units, but that over 4 units, most of our ordinances no longer apply, setbacks, massing, height. But other ordinances still do apply. And so what we need to think through as a council is what are those ordinances and how would they interact with larger construction? And what issues arise, and are there changes to those ordinances that we should contemplate in order to be able to accommodate or have appropriate control over larger mass or more structures that are more than 4 units that might be proposed by a developer. I see that as a multi-month process. So while we're going to introduce that tonight, I wouldn't be surprised if our Coming out of it with that understanding, we'll be asking the Land Use Committee to do some more work and then come back and have a chance for the council to review later on in the fall. But with a view that whatever action we may wish to take, we should take no later than early next year in order to have any changes on the books at the time that developers might be coming forth with some proposals. So those are the two topics. But I certainly want to lead with the discussion of the SRA, because that's the one that is both important and urgent. Just to provide a very quick schedule of that, if we have our meeting tonight to come up with some preliminary ideas, Irene is going to be fashioning a draft letter, which is the kind of letter that we would potentially be prepared to give to the county council, but also share with our other municipalities, and let council get a look at that over the next couple of days. Then the Long Range Planning Committee is meeting on September 3rd. We'd like to get a draft in their hands before they meet so they could see that. We also want to get a draft in the hands of the LUC. I understand you're meeting on the 8th, I believe, but we may have to, if you want to make comments, it may be necessary to give us comments one way or another earlier if you can. But we'll then be taking up the matter on September 10th, weighing any further reflections we have, along with any other comments that the committees have, and finalizing our position on the 10th, and then submitting our testimony so that I can testify on September 16th on behalf of the town. So that's the rough schedule that we have. I'm going to turn it over to Irene to lead this discussion. But before I do, I want to make one representation in my capacity as liaison to the Public Services Committee. I'm sorry, I wrote PRC. I meant to say long range. Thank you. Last year, I was the liaison to the Public Services Committee. Now I am the liaison to the Long Range Planning Committee. The Long Range Planning Committee met in June. I was unable to make that meeting, but Irene was able to substitute for me. They basically had a long discussion about this SRA and the issue of consolidation of lots. And I just wanted to report to the council on what was the summary view. Ellen took kind of was at that point the chair of the committee, took a straw vote of sort of where the members were in respect to consolidation. And there was one vote for making no recommendation, implicitly agreeing that you could put 3 lots together. There were 3 votes that felt that they were not comfortable making a recommendation at this time without having enough information on traffic, utilities, infrastructure, and what will be done in the site review process. And then there were 7 votes with a recommendation that basically putting 3 lots together was too much. Even 2 lots was probably too much, and they would really be happier if there was no consolidation at all. So I just wanted to report that. I'll emphasize that this was a preliminary discussion, and at that time, and you'll be hearing tonight more discussion from Irene about some different ideas, there were no other ideas put on the table as to how to shape the prospect of consolidation in different ways. So the only matter on the table was whether sort of inside the box effectively of what the draft SRA proposed, which was how many lots might be consolidated. So it was a fairly limited lens, if you will, on what could be done. But in any event, I just wanted to make sure that I faithfully reported on that conversation. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Irene, and you can lead us through some discussion. We're going through this. And I know, by the way, Eric and Dean, we've certainly received the material. Thank you very much for that. We have incorporated that in a spreadsheet, which we'll be referring to. Tonight in our discussion, we will not be referring to any individual address. We'll be talking generally about the information. I will give you both, even though it's a work session for the 5 of us, if there are comments that you wish to make as we go through this, please raise your hand and we'll be glad to hear your thoughts on what we're going through.
Happy to elaborate on things too. Happy to elaborate if helpful.
Thank you.
Okay.
So thanks for that. Thank you for that introduction. I did want to add as well. So when the county council passed the ZTA in July, they made the effective date of November 1st. So the same date whereby the county council approved the ZTA, there was an introduction of this SRA, which as the mayor pointed out to, kind of stipulates two different things. One being let's consolidate 3 lots, or they allow the consolidation of 3 lots. And the second part is let's make clearer, if you will, about the inability to combine an eligible lot, that lot that's abutting the I called it growth corridor for a second, but the boulevard, the corridor with a lot that's behind it. So that would be an ineligible lot. So that's the purpose or the point of the introduction of the SRA, which the reason an SRA was introduced is because I guess the way the law works in the county, this type of discussion could not have occurred as they were discussing the ZTA. So that's where we're at the moment. Going back to the June meeting with the Long Range Planning Committee, and I appreciate that Joy is also on the line as the new chair of the committee. There was, thinking about the underlying concerns and questions and fears of what a resulting building would look like if you allowed the consolidation of 3 lots. So that allowed for kind of further introspection of what do these lots look like in the town, those lots that are eligible on Connecticut Avenue and those lots that are eligible on East-West Highway. Because although we're all zoned as R60, meaning there's a minimum amount of 6,000 square feet, that's not the case, say, across the board. The range is in size, the range in size of these lots is extremely varied. You can go from 6.5 or 7,000 all the way up to 20,000 square feet. So it's understandable why residents might be concerned about the consolidation of lots when you think about how some of them are so large. So started to take a bit more of a look about that, like when taking into account some of these lots or some of these homes are historical in nature, and therefore, while the interior of the home can be modified, if you will, redeveloped into a multifamily property, the exterior or facade of the home could not. So that's, if you will, even though it's part of the eligibility map, it's not necessarily practical to say that you would be able to knock down those homes. So there were a number of homes that were in that category. Another part of it is there are a number of homes that are on corners, and that would not necessarily make them eligible when they don't have a Connecticut, in our case, Connecticut Avenue or East-West Highway address. So taking all that aside, we took a look at, kind of the bucket that's left over and started to again think about what actual probability, if you will, would there be to consolidate different properties. And Jay Kelly from the Long Range Planning Committee started out with a great spreadsheet, just taking all the addresses down, listing out the lot sizes, things like that. And of course, Deedon and Eric added to that information. And, taking into account that not only would there's different topographies, parking, on-site parking would need to be done, and all of the historical stuff and the corner lots and all of that. It ends up that out of the 50 some odd lots that are along these corridors is probably about 15 that are potentially eligible for redevelopment, and that could mean anywhere from duplexes through to larger buildings. I do want to just mention, because this is being recorded, that if a lot were to be redeveloped as a multifamily property, we as the town are still able to impose or make sure our building regulations were enforced if it's a duplex, a triplex, or quadplex. Anything 5 units or more, of course, would include workforce housing, but also would be then subject to county regulation. So I just want to mention that because I don't know who's going to be viewing this later.
Can I interrupt one thing?
Of course.
And by the way, in the context of a work session, we're freer about interrupting each other and making comments back and forth, politely, but still, we can more of a conversation going. Just to stress that those are 15 lots, which we would arguably see as being developable on a standalone basis. Obviously, if there was consolidation, that would increase the number that could get caught up in some redevelopment.
Potentially, yes.
Potentially, yes, right, okay.
Potentially.
And also, I wanted to, want to make sure, maybe it's a good time, Eric, if you had any further color you wanted to add to your work. But I think one of the things you added, which is very helpful, was taking a look at essentially the tear down value of the lot and recognizing that some lots simply have such high tear down values because the homeowner is so valuable today that as a practical matter, a developer would find it hard to make money putting up something new. So that was part of what also cut back on some of the units that might otherwise, just in terms of their address, have looked plausible. So that was helpful. But all this, we all know, is very, very preliminary and best judgment, but that's all it is. Obviously, at the end of the day, developers will figure things out and they'll do what they want to do, and they could do this over a long span of time and things could change. So we're not making any representation here. We're just trying to have a sense of what might be a medium-term impact, for lack of a better term.
Now, assuming interest rates, cost of materials,
Right.
Demand, exactly right. Thank you for that clarification.
Do I give Eric a chance to see if there's?
Of course, if you have, I have some more stuff, but go ahead, Eric. If
I tried to give a very quick overview of what I saw. Again, very simplistically, there are so many variables involved, and there are ways the design could be tweaked where maybe 1 or 2 more properties could be deemed eligible. I was working off what I thought was a pretty good template as far as a hypothetical model for a standalone condo unit. I identified 2 areas on Connecticut Avenue that I thought had the potential to be assemblage sites that you might really want to focus on. And then there was definitely the one site on East-West Highway. And in my letter, I only mentioned one stretch on Connecticut. And there's one house in between that is so improved that it wouldn't economically make sense probably to take that house down. So there's more digging if it's helpful. But I wanted to, when I met with Eden, we wanted to give you something tangible so you could have an idea that, from a quantitative standpoint, here's what you're looking at as potential homes that could be up for redevelopment based on economics and then site conditions.
Yeah, so extremely helpful, especially since this is the business that you're in, so none of us are in this, so it's so helpful. But after looking at all the data, we went back to this, set of comments, if you will, that were expressed during the Long Range Planning Committee meeting about, we just don't know what to expect in terms of this scale, and what could be done so that there's a bit more transparency and predictability in what potential lot consolidations might look like. So of course, the individual lot, that's one thing that, and Eric, again, you're pointing out that there was individual lots that are attractive from that standpoint. But we were also thinking about it from the consolidation standpoint, like what's the practicality there. So that led to kind of some introspection and going back to the planning department materials that have been included about what lot consolidation might look like and what that might result in terms of buildings. And what was interesting about it was that for R60, when they said, here's what 2 lots would look like, here's what 3 lots would look like, there was an assumption that it was a 6,000 square foot lot. And so the idea that we're kind of thinking about right now is, okay, if the assumption here is that it's a 6,000 square foot lot, let's try and look at it from the standpoint of what the upper limit might be. And maybe what could be done as a way to talk with the county council members is 6,000 times 3 is 18,000. If there is a lot consolidation being proposed on lots that when combined are larger than 18,000 square feet, then it can't be done, right? Because that essentially is already, 18,000 square feet is already a pretty sizable lot. When you add the 1.25 FAR, you can definitely build something big. However, that's a bit more manageable, if you will, in terms of I dare I say compatibility, but just scale, massing and scale, than something that is an 18,000 square foot lot times 3. So it does jive, this potential idea, and this is what I wanted to talk about tonight. Is this something that, what do you think about that? What do you think about the idea of just taking the assumptions that have been made by the planning department and just putting that into the SRA so the planning board has some direction when the site plan comes in front of them? And it says it's more than 18,000, we won't be able to do that. But if it's 17,999, we're good to go. And that way there's a bit of a set of parameters that takes into account smaller lots that are around the county, including those that are smaller on East-West Highway, that if they were able to be put together, that might be an interesting project and might address some issues around topography. But then when it's just too large of a lot combining with another's, you wouldn't necessarily be facing a bigger massed building. So just putting that out there for discussion tonight. Yeah, do you mind, or I can give you the, only so that we get it on the.
Okay. 2 comments. One is, I think 18,000 is probably too big. I would be happier with 12,000. But another option might be, rather than saying that you cannot combine lots that exceed X, would be to say that if you combine lots and it exceeds X, you can only calculate the amount of FAR that you're allowed to build on that combined lot as 1.25 times X. So if the upper limit was 18,000 and you had a lot that was 22,000 when you combined it, the FAR that you could build would be 1.25 times 18,000, not 1.25 times 122,000 or whatever, 22,000. That would be another option. Then you've got more open space left on that lot, but the building that you're putting up on it is still restrained to be a little more reasonable.
Yes, let me ask a question about that. It really goes to Ron. In respect to the SRA, could we even entertain what Dean is suggesting? In other words, something that really goes to limiting the massing of the building on the site. Wouldn't that be an issue that has to be addressed in the ZTA?
Yeah, I would expect that to be the response from planning staff and council's legislative attorney, that type of restriction would need to be in the use table in the zoning code as a restriction on massing, rather than in the subdivision regulations, which are what does the lot look like? What are the lot dimensions is really what the SRA deals with.
I should stress, I like the idea when you sent it over earlier today, but I reflected on it, I said humph, because we have gotten some education about the bright line between what has to be in the ZTA versus what has to be in the SRA. And the SRA is really focused on subdivision issues, meaning consolidation, not on how you use a specific piece of land. One other thing I'll mention, was there something else you wanted to say? You threw it over
No,
the
just
discussion.
time.
on the, to be clear that if you then go to our map and you look at the size of the individual lots, regardless of whether the limit was 12 or 18, effectively, there's no consolidation on Connecticut.
Right.
In other words, you take the two smallest lots on Connecticut and you put them together, you will be over 18,000 square feet. Because and not that we should feel defensive about that, that's because there's so many lots in Connecticut already, which are 12, 15, 18, 20,000 square feet, which presumably, according to the maps of and renderings of the planning department, are already large enough. So, it's not like we're saying no to multifamily housing in a backdoor way. We're just saying those lots are already at a scale that can support it.
Just a clarifying question for me. We talked about homes that are designated historic. That applies to the home. If you purchase the lot with the home and you don't adjust the exterior of the home, can you use the land? Can you build closer to the home? I wonder if our assumption that a historic home would constrict the use of the land that the home sits on to be combined with an adjacent lot.
Ron?
So I guess the question is, could you assemble lots, leave the historic building alone and build new family housing next to it? I think the answer is yes. You could do that because the historic restrictions aren't going to be impacted unless you're modifying that historic building.
So our view of assembly might be we may be looking at it a little bit more narrowly.
I see what you're hitting. Yeah.
I know that for historic properties, for historic properties, a permit is required for grading and retaining walls and other things that are not directly related to the house. So there are historical aspects of the property itself that are looked at. So that probably would, I think, come into play as far as how it gets reviewed by the Historic Commission.
Yeah, I'm thinking about one property on Connecticut that has you can't even touch the fence. It's not really a fence, but a fencing perimeter mechanism because of his historic nature, I guess the whole thing, but that's still a very clever way of going around it for sure. But yeah, to that point, Barney, yeah, when you take into account, there is an assumption being made about the historic properties. There's also the corner lots. It's like, okay, what's left over? There's actually, and if this 18,000 or even if it was 12 put in there, you wouldn't be able to have any lot consolidations on Connecticut, period. You could develop each individual one certainly, but not necessarily combine it with another. So on East-West, it's a little bit of a different story. So.
Right.
And it might be worth mentioning as well. I'll have to go and find it, but I remember reading recently, there is a provision in the historic preservation regulations that's sort of a provision meant to add flexibility. I'll email it to you, but it basically says all of these regulations should be applied with new planning rules in mind, which we previously flagged as potentially problematic with the multifamily regulations coming in. Let me track that down and I'll send it to you. So the point being, even if you have to get a permit, the review could be relaxed in the future.
Carla, did you have another point to make? Okay. Eric, I have a question for you about the attitude of developers and consolidation. We all talk about it as though it can happen with a snap of the finger, but of course, lots don't come can come onto the market that way. So, in your mind, if as developers, looking at a lot and would be interested in multifamily housing, but only if he could consolidate with a neighboring lot, how much time would he be willing to wait? In other words, so he's successful in acquiring property A, but is he willing to sit up with property A for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, waiting till he can get property B? Or, what, and then especially if 3 lots could be consolidated, how much time would he be willing to wait before he'd be able to do the aggregation? What's your sense of the economics of how the developers and their patience, and we've given the economic cost of capital?
I think they're still kind of in the learning phase of this to understand where this is going. The cost of capital is prohibitively high, where holding a property for an extended period of time would really chew into the margin. So I don't see many doing that on a speculative basis. Certainly if one of the eligible properties came on the market, I could see an effort to try to go to the next door neighbor to see if they'd be interested in selling and potentially, combining that to get the better density. I'm not sure you would see people buy a property, rent it and hold it with the idea of trying to wait out the neighbors. It's possible, but probably not probable.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
We'll follow on to that. So that's actually what I was thinking about, is a couple of neighbors that have desirable lots getting together and themselves combining their lots for sale. And I especially see that on East-West Highway. But so, me and my neighbor we figure we got tear downs and our land value is about $1 million. But if we say, well, why don't we just put these up for sale together and ask 3 million for those? How often does that kind of thing happen in your experience, where homeowners get together and
I recall an effort on Elm Street to do something like that a number of years ago. With this type of scenario, I could certainly see that if homeowners were up to date on what potential upside was there by working together. I could see a united group of contiguous properties offering as a package something that was developer friendly, like a 12-month settlement, so they have time to go through the process, get permitting, things like that. And yeah, that's a real possibility.
Any other comments, Rich?
no?
Okay. Cameron, do you have any initial thoughts about Irene's suggestion?
Yes, I mean, I think it makes sense, the thinking about it in terms of those underlying assumptions from the planning board and thinking about sort of realistically the size of the lots, because otherwise it's completely variable. I mean, depending on how big the lots are in the different places. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
So I do, I don't remember if it said, so since November 1st is the date, the effective date for the ZTA, there is an assumption here that the SRA will get maybe one work session before the county council decides to vote on this. So another aspect of this particular proposal here is that it's simple. And it's either whether you agree with it or not, but it's a simple one versus something that might go into different directions and require more thought, more discussions. So that's all.
I see Mary Rayner, your hand is up. If you wish to make a comment, that'd be all right. Mary? You're muted. We also, it'd be nice to see you.
I had to find it. I have a question. I was wondering whether or not any of you have a concern that the development could snowball, because I would imagine that if I was living in one of these, what used to be very majestic homes on Connecticut Avenue, and all of a sudden there's an apartment building next door to me, not only would my property value take a huge hit, but I'd be afraid of it getting worse. And so I could imagine there being sort of a rush to sell. And where my concern comes from about that is when I was living in Greenwich, Connecticut, the town did something. I mean, they didn't implement it this way, but there was a big push to create some more I don't want to call it more affordable, but just create more housing. And there were assumptions about how that was going to affect the town in terms of, in particular, education, because like Chevy Chase, they had really excellent schools. And the town got really swamped because what happened was they didn't expect a lot of people with children to move into the housing that was being developed, and they ended up with many more times of children than anticipated, and it totally swamped the education budget. You know, they were just overwhelmed, and there was no way that the tax revenue from the housing was going to cover the cost of education. So I just wonder whether, you know, it seems like this is going to progress slowly and take a lot of time for some of this to happen. But I was just wondering also from the people who work in this industry, whether or not there's a sense that it could snowball that way and become overwhelming to the town in terms of traffic and everything else that goes with that.
Well, I think one first comment is that obviously we don't know the speed at which any of this is going to come about, but that issue is basically what the ZTA was about, which was passed by the county council. So that is now an ordinance. We can't deal with it. You know, that's set. The only issue in front of us at this point going forward is the issue of consolidation, and that's what we're focused on. I don't know if Eric, you want to weigh in with any thoughts about as a real estate agent as to whether these things snowball, or if you find that individual lots are developed and the neighboring lots stay pretty much the same for a while.
No, I agree. I think if speculative developers see someone take one of the properties and maximize its density for units yielded, I could see them jumping on board to say, hey, that was a pretty good project. And like I said earlier, I think it's still very early in the process where people on the development side really aren't quite sure what the process is like, what the risks of denial might be, and you know how difficult the process might be. And so once somebody does it, I could see other people jumping on board and trying to look at other eligible properties along those same corridors and do the same thing. So yeah, I could see that pace pick up because I think the margin for profit can be significant on the condo side.
So if we go and think about the development at the corner at the edge of town, that is not in the town, but within the Bethesda downtown plan limits, that 3 townhouse project has not sold, been on the market for close to a year potentially, if not, I've lost track. So what sort of lessons learned do you think the development community is getting out of that particular experience?
Well, I think they did a lot of big mistakes on the design, the pricing, the finishes, just the way that project came together. So I think there are some lessons learned there, but I think they missed the opportunity. Their basis in the lot, as I recall, was, gosh, I thought it was around $1.5 million, $1.6 million. So to get that lot basis and yield 3 units and then come out well over 3 million each, that was a little too ambitious. I think there was plenty of margin for them had they come out under 2 million initially, and they probably would have sold. And then I think that would have been a win in a developer's column, because their cost to develop, the savings based on economies of scale, would have really made that one a winner. But I think there were a number of missteps on that particular project that caused that one, which they're now apparently renting all 3 of them. You know, there's some lessons learned there, but I wouldn't necessarily say that that's what you'll see elsewhere. You could see someone pull that off with a much greater level of success.
Mm.
Well, I don't know what the assumption would be for a lot adjacent to a commingled lots. Is the assumption that the property value would increase or decrease if you were next to a commingled multi-story, multi-unit condo? My own assumption would be the developer would probably go in higher than the value of what the property is to get it if he saw the potential for it to be developed.
Yeah, I think that's more of a subjective judgment call to make, but in reality, I think the value of the land, the property in general, would go up. Now, if the property next door to you was developed and you sit in a property that is highly improved as a single family home, that might be a different scenario. But if the home next door to that developed property is, not a highly improved home, then I could see that one going up in value based on the density opportunity. So I guess it all depends on what kind of investment the next door neighbors made in their property.
Thinking about the term snowball, and one other comment is that there's one stretch, I guess, where there are perhaps 4 or so homes in a row in Connecticut, but most Connecticut is 2 or 3 homes in a block. It's not more than that. So it's not like dominoes, if you will. But still, the point's taken that these things are very hard to judge, and it's certainly hard to judge what will be the impact of the number of school-age kids and other things that will happen. One thing that will at least allow those issues to be ventilated, the ZTA does require that the development be done through the optional method, which means that the project has to be brought before the planning staff. And one of the things that we pushed for, and Irene, you were very instrumental in this, was to make sure that this would be a full-blown review by the planning board and have to be voted by the board. It could not be handled as an administrative matter, signed off just by the director of the planning department. So the kind of issues that you are raising, Mary, can be raised and ventilated, and if there's a concern about any of the aspects of the project. Having said that, the exact number of kids in a project, that's hard to judge under any circumstance. That's always going to be something of a question mark. One other thing I wanted to mention about it, which one of the reasons that I find this approach appealing is that I think we have to be very aware of the politics we're facing here. The SRA had very strong, the ZTA had very strong support from the county council. I think there were only 2 people who opposed, or three who opposed it, right. So 8-3. Both Irene and I, having looked at this and looking at SRA, feel like this is sort of the end of the process from the point of view of the county council. They'll want to take that up, work it quickly, get it done, and move on. It's an election year. 3 of the members of the county council are running for county executive. I don't think they want this issue trailing them right through into next year, which will be an election year. So I think just as part of the context here, it's important to realize that, and at least this is just my view, that if we came and just said no consolidation, let's say no, that would probably be a very ineffective answer. I don't think that would be respected by the county council. I think if we say something along the lines, and I think it's certainly true at the level of 18,000, it's arguably less true, but still valid at 12,000, where we're saying we're not opposed to consolidation. It can happen. And it'll happen with the small lots, where arguably putting 2 small lots together or 3 small lots together will enable multifamily housing. But we just we want to focus on the appropriate scale and massing. That, in my mind, is a much more politically palatable way to present it. And it seems consistent, as Irene pointed out, with the renderings done by the planning staff themselves. And much more likely to gain some traction. and come across as being a moderate position than something that says, no, we don't want any consolidation, in which case what will be pointed out to us is you're telling us that you can't even consolidate, a 6,000 square foot lot. Well, we know that that's not going to be much for multifamily housing. So you've just found a backdoor way to oppose multifamily housing. And that will seriously reduce the credibility of our position. So I think when we're thinking about our position, we have to weigh the context of where the county council is and how we think we could be effective.
So do you see this as an approach that we could get behind? Okay.
And just to clarify, what is the approach again?
The approach would be that there would be an upper limit on the consolidated lot size. So it would be 6,000 times 3 lot. You could still do
Okay.
two, you could do 2 lots,
Yes,
whatever, but the
okay.
limit would be 18,000 square feet. That's the biggest in R60. If they want to take that approach for we were all R60, so we only mind about that. For R90, if they want to take that same approach and do 27,000, fine, but that we're not R90, so we won't speak to that.
So I was,
I guess the caveat, I don't know if we decide whether the limit would be 12 or 18.
Yes, so
Yes,
that's what I was
that's
trying
what-
to, yeah,
that's what I was,
Leave that open and we can consider that, but it
yeah,
would be
good point.
made progress if we got to the point that that was what was bracketed, but the rest was.
Yeah.
in agreement.
that's all I was going to clarify.
Okay.
There's one other aspect that we've considered about this, which separate from the question of consolidation of the lots laterally, which is to strengthen the statement in the SRA regarding the lots. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to this?
There's yeah, thank you. So that's like part 2 of this SRA, which is again, a lot cannot be, it's prohibited to be combined with the lot behind, right? They don't want to go into it. So it says flag lots and
Through lots.
through lots. Thank you. I will say that just a discussion, one-on-one discussion that I had with Todd earlier today, I think that this can be strengthened even more because the corner lot situation did not seem to be explicit. I think it had been inferred and discussed and decided upon during the PHP work session, but it possibly did not end up in the final language. And Todd, maybe I'm speaking out of turn and we found the reference.
Yeah, I've had some conversations with Ron in the interim since you and I spoke. Ron, do you want to report what you found? There was an issue of, just briefly summarize, there was an issue of whether we were identifying the appropriate lots based on the MC Atlas data where they identified eligible lots, whether or not, in fact, some of those corner lots that were identified as ineligible would in fact be eligible. And I think we found that they would be eligible for consolidation under the current ZTA and the way the county handles subdivisions. Ron, do you want to go into more detail about that?
Yeah, sure. So when we talk about eligible lot, ineligible lot, the ZTA doesn't actually use that terminology. The ZTA provides that a lot must abut an applicable corridor in order to be developable under the workforce housing rules. And so we sought we've been thinking about in the SRA to codify what it means to be an eligible lot with specific reference back to the ZTA, say something like an eligible lot is one that abuts one of these applicable corridors. With respect to corner lots, that becomes a little murky. As you all know, a map has been prepared. It's available on the planning board website showing which lots are eligible, and corner lots are reflected as eligible on that map now based on which lot line they front. A corner lot at the town level fronts on 2 lot lines. A street is deemed a front lot line. regardless of how the house is situated. The county approach is a little different. So back up. So for town purposes, the same front setback applies to both lot lines of a corner lot. The county approach is a little different. The county has a front lot line and then a side street lot line. And the minimum setback for the front is 25 and the side street is 15. And the reason the county does this is they think someone standing on the street looking at a corner lot, they're going to think, okay, this is the front of the house because that's where the house is facing. This other yard is a side street because it's functioning as a side yard. So we're going to give them a smaller required setback on that side. Because from the neighbor's perspective, they're looking at a functional side yard. They're not looking at a functional front yard. So a smaller setback can apply. So right now, the map that's been prepared of eligible lots is based on the county's determination of which of the lot lines of these corner lots is the front. In the planning staff report, I'm sorry, not planning staff, in the legislative council's attorney report to the county council, she writes, the front lot line for purposes of this ZTA is typically where the house is addressed, typically where the house is oriented, the front facade. But use of the word typical in that report reflects that that's not always the case. So with respect to the map we have now of these eligible and ineligible corner lots, it seems apparent that eligibility can change if the front lot line changes. And at the county level, how I've seen it happen in the past is, let's say someone's coming into Department of Permitting Services to get a permit for an addition. And they may be told, well, you can't put it here because it's going to conflict with your 20-foot rear setback. And so the applicant can actually say, well, I'm on a corner lot and I want to redesignate this yard as my side and this is in my rear, so I can have a more favorable outcome with respect to the setbacks. And the county will allow that redesignation so long as existing improvements don't prevent it. So, for example, in that instance, if they had a shed or detached garage on the lot, those structures have to be in a rear yard. So the presence of those structures dictate the rear yard. And under the county code, the rear yard dictates the front yard and the front lot line. So that applicant's not able to make the change. But for some of these lots that aren't currently bound, or as Todd and I and Dave discussed today, what happens if a developer buys an ineligible lot, tears down the building, then goes into DPS for a new permit and says, well, my lot should now be deemed eligible because I'm going to say my front lot line is now on the corridor and not on the interior street. The ZTA legislative history, to my knowledge, does not address that situation, other than the comments that fronting can be selected by the applicant. So in the March 26, 25 staff report, Legislative Council says, fronting on a corridor means the property's front lot line is on one of the applicable corridors. To determine the front lot line, DPS first determines the rear yard location. Generally, whichever side has enough room for the rear yard, the opposite lot line becomes the front yard. There are instances where both sides have enough room, in which case the owner may decide which is the rear. While the front lot line is often where the front door is, that is not always the case. So, that explains the use of the word typically. Typically it's the address, but not always. And this makes me think, like I've seen in the past with respect to other permit applications, it would be possible under the ZTA for an ineligible building to be demolished and then the front lot line to be redesignated. And then that lot would be depicted as an eligible lot on the map of eligible lots on applicable corridors. Does that
Okay.
make sense to everyone?
My head hurts.
And I don't think it matters much.
Basically,
That's-
you have.
I basically get it. It's okay. But
I mean, I
what it
guess
leads
the
to-
bottom line is we have to take that existing map of eligible properties with a grain of salt. There is a possibility that some other corner lots
Well, I
reflected
guess
as ineligible could be eligible in the future.
I got that, but I guess the broader point that is in framing this additional issue of wanting to make really clear that front to back combinations are not permitted and having that clarity in the SRA, right? Can we take advantage of that to also clarify that corner lots that are currently not don't have addresses on the major corridors are ineligible? I don't know what the wording is, but the underlying principle
Frozen.
Rosen, the underlying principle is this. And this goes back to something that came up, and maybe I've mentioned this to my colleagues in the time that we recently, but in regard to when we worked on the Bethesda downtown plan, which is we as residents and voters in the county dealing with an extremely complicated, convoluted code have the right to know that when we read a section of the code, inside the four corners of that code, it's complete, makes sense, and not something which is undercut by some other part of the code. So when it comes to the issue of eligibility and consolidation, we should be able to look to the part of the code that the SRA affects and know that that is it. That's where we go. And we define exactly whether that lot is eligible or not and what can be done in respect to consolidation. What we don't want is a reference back to another part of the code, which if that other code is changed, then that effectively changes what we thought was a set deal in the part of the code that we were focusing on, right? So it seems to me that if what we have here now is another example of some lack of clarity and lots that we thought were not eligible suddenly could become eligible because of the way a developer takes them and redevelops it, then we should look to further clarification in some further wording in our proposed change to the SRA that makes clear that the eligible lots are the ones that are currently eligible, full stop. And that, we as the residents in these areas have a deal was struck, and it was a very frank political deal in terms of how many lots would potentially be redeveloped, all in the context of some of these lots being really large, as ours are, and seeking to limit that somewhat. And the deal that was struck, and this was a vote 2-1 in the Planning and Housing Committee, and it carried, was that, well, yeah, we will not have corner lots. That is to say, lots with addresses that face on Connecticut and East-West Highway. Those lots those lots can be included, but the lots where the addresses that are on the side streets, those corner houses are not eligible. And we need a way to hardwire that. I don't know what the wording should be, but there has to be some way to hardwire that in the SRA.
Yeah, there is a way, because we could say that an assemblage of 3 eligible lots means the lots that are eligible as of the date of this legislation. You could put in a date that captures the map in existence.
Good.
You know,
So what, we are trying to work.
when we were dealing with the ZTA, I raised this issue and I suggested one of the things we should request, which we did request, which was not granted by the council, was that the code reference a specific map. Rather than currently what we have to do is we have to find first where the applicable corridors, and applicable corridors are then defined as downtown streets and boulevards as defined in other chapters. I think the county council met us halfway by having this, unofficial map with a disclaimer available. But yeah, it's not a concrete enforceable map that we can rely on now. I mean,
Could we put that in the SRA? Because we did that in the downtown plan. We
Yeah,
ultimately
I
have a
mean,
specific
we can
map
certainly,
where the heights are the
ask for
heights
it.
and are carved out.
Yeah, we can certainly ask for it. I'll send you an email with some additional thoughts that I don't need to burden you with now.
All right.
So are we okay with 18,000
I thought
or 12?
I thought I heard some interest in 12. I guess I lean towards 12. Yeah.
Well, for now, we can put in brackets, I guess. Right. We don't have to decide that tonight, do we?
Okay. Do you all feel about 12 versus 18? And again, let's look back at this kind of analysis that was done. Whether it's 12 or 18, it doesn't impact the result on Connecticut. But allows potential flexibility because it's an optional method of development process. It's a little bit easier for developers to work around an 18 spot than a 12,000 spot. So, but I'll go with what you guys want to do.
I get that. I guess I want to get back to what Barney said about the politics of this. If we go to 12, that really does limit the amount of facilities you can put on that lot, units you can put on that lot. And I think, personally, I think that the county council would think that, gee, they're trying to limit us in terms of what the amount of housing can be in these. And so I understand that 12 may be better, but it's not impactful for us, I don't think. So why set it at 12 when we know that might alienate them? Why not say 18, because it's not going to affect us anyhow?
Yeah, I have a similar thought. I also think, another way to look at it is look at our smallest lots. And if you can only combine, the smaller lots are in the, 5,000 square feet, 5,500 square feet. So you couldn't combine 3 of those. If you left it at 12, if you had it at 12, then you can only develop on, 10 or 11,000 square feet. I think that it's going to be hard to make that work. Also, the county's materials themselves reference the 18,000 square feet in an R60 example. And so I think it is an easier argument to construct that, consistent with what has been represented to us, we could support an assembly up to 18,000 square feet. But I think 12 would be, it's just small. If you look at it from the other end, it's a small number to try, and given like you said, it makes no difference on Connecticut, but on East West, you'd be limited to, approximately 11,000 square foot 2-lot assembly to try and do something with, which, is effectively, I think, going to make it very hard to do anything.
Yeah, and I think they would view that as us trying to subvert their intent.
There's one other aspect to it, which is, I think we would be asked the question. So a developer could buy a single lot of 18 or 20,000 feet and put up multifamily housing,
Yeah.
but he wouldn't be able to assemble more than 2 lots of 12,000. What's the logic of that? Notice if we stayed at 12, we would be asked that question.
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
The question would be,
Yeah.
so someone gets a single lot, they can get 18 to 20,000 square feet.
Right.
That they can do that. So why would you limit someone else consolidating 2 small lots to only 12,000? Where's the fairness? Well, what's the point of saying that constraining that combination only 12,000 when otherwise they could buy a larger lot and put up a large,
And we have some of those larger lots.
Right. But the only reason I'm just sensitive to the fact that this is our first discussion. So, and I do want us to be able to move on and let Irene work on a letter. Can we put 18, but put brackets around the number? Okay. So what I'm trying to get at is, I think a majority of the council is comfortable with 18, but I don't want us to represent that we've all signed off on that. So there's clearly a bracket means this is still to be further considered and it's not a final decision. Is that something that would be?
I'm happy to put a letter together so that, because the most important thing is the approach that the town wants to take towards this and how we want to structure the argument. Whatever the resulting number is the resulting number. So in a way, I really wanted to be able to get consensus tonight that the approach of having an upper limit was the approach versus going in and saying, nope, 2 is the 2 lot consolidation, no ifs, ands, or buts, or versus another approach. So that's really the important part of it.
And it allows you to refer back to the arguments about this, using 6,000 square feet.
Yeah.
In this,
Right.
so, yeah, you're just building on that.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Okay, so.
Is that okay, Tom?
Yes, and also I think it would be good to take this approach because I think you referenced the straw poll where I guess seven people thought, thought that, I guess they were talking numbers of lots, not
Yes.
this approach, but I think there's an assumption that, if they thought 3 was too much, 2 might be too much. Anyway, all this to say, it gives us time to, I guess, reach some kind of, nuanced position to take their views into consideration.
Well, I would say that in many respects we have. I mean, most of the lots that people are focused on are on Connecticut Avenue.
Mhm.
And whether it's 12 or 18,000, effectively it means no consolidation on Connecticut Avenue.
Right.
So it's not as though we're actually paying pretty close attention
Yeah.
to people's concern about, which I think is the major concern, that no one would be happy about having 2 20,000 square foot lots put together, let alone 3 20,000 square foot lots. And that's, I think, a universal view, and one that we're sharing by limiting the consolidation to even at 18, where effectively it would not be possible to consolidate on Connecticut.
So I'll put together some thoughts into a draft and send that out. Because of the timing of all this, I want to make sure that there's an opportunity for the Long Range Planning Committee and the Land Use Committee to provide feedback. We'll be, as a council, meeting again about this on September 10th to finalize the wording because it has to be submitted a couple of days later in time for the public hearing on the 16th. Another aspect of all this is that we'd like to try and work with the other municipalities, the other Chevy Chase municipalities, to coalesce around a couple of ideas like this and see if something can, kind of a united approach towards this if we can get everybody on the same page. So ideally, I'd be able to send a letter over for your review tomorrow, see if we get it back this weekend if possible. And then that way there's enough time for the committees and others to look at it.
And also send around to municipalities.
Yeah.
And I think we have to talk to the municipalities even during the upcoming week before the 10th, just because we're running out of time.
time.
We always have to be careful to say to them, we haven't made our final decision. We could change our mind, but here's where we are at the moment. Just want to, and besides, we'll get some good feedback from them also, which we can.
It's
then
certainly a
report.
lot easier to edit something and
Right.
have you think than start from scratch. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Irene, for all the work you've done on this. What I want to turn to is introduce this other point, which has to do with the ordinances. And Ron, could I ask you to give us an overview of which ordinances are still in the power of the town, even for developments that are more than 4 units? and the basic provisions of those ordinances, just to refresh everybody's memory here.
Sure. So as everybody will recall, with the amendment we achieved to section 2509 of the land use article of the Maryland Code, our building regulations can be applied to buildings containing up to 4 units. So those are building regulations. Regulations that are not building regulations aren't subject to that 4-unit limit. So our urban forest ordinance, our stormwater drainage ordinance, and the provisions of chapter 4 that relate to driveway aprons and curb cuts would all still apply regardless of the number of units that are in a building.
And could you quickly go over some of the main provisions of the stormwater management ordinance in particular, but also the forest ordinance too?
So with respect to stormwater drainage, if a project involves development activity, the excavation of land or the creation of 700 square feet or more of new impervious surface, then the new impervious surface that is created has to be captured and treated on site. And Dave, please jump in if I misstate anything. And so that means when new construction comes in or a substantial addition, the water drainage plan has to be prepared, and that water drainage plan has to calculate the runoff that's generated from the new impervious surface above that threshold, and it has to be treated somehow on site. With respect to urban forest ordinance.
Sorry, on stormwater management.
Yes.
Let's bear down on this a bit. We know that with the multifamily housing, as you go above 4 units, you also have to have a substantial amount of parking, right? Two units of parking for every regular market priced, and 1 unit, effectively 1 unit of parking for every
workforce housing
unit.
Yep.
So if someone is going to put up, say, 5 units, that basically means what, 9 parking spots?
That's right. Yeah. And yeah,
So
a triplex with 3 units, 3 3-bedroom units needs 5.
Right. I'm going to 5 because that's the first point beyond the level of control that the town would have with our own ordinances.
Gotcha.
So what I'm trying to get at is if a developer is going to put up a 5-unit complex with 9 parking spots, and let's assume that they're going to be surface, he's not going to want to, put them in an underground garage, and he's limited to 40 feet. So it's not unlikely to, I think, want to use the first level of the house to be the garage and put, right? I'm just saying, so I'm just trying to get a sense of, and maybe this takes some further discussion and something to be done over the fall, is sort of how practical is it? How easily could all the stormwater from that amount of impervious space be treated and handled on the property? Or alternatively, do you put in parking spots that have permeable surface? Is that something that people will do and that will solve that problem? I'm just trying to get a sense of what people would do.
Yeah, I mean, Dave can speak more on the technical aspects than me, but I would say that much pavement, even pavers, is going to render stormwater drainage very difficult, because under the Maryland Design Manual, which sets forth the technical specifications for water control measures, there are certain setbacks that apply to, let's say, a rain tank. If you decide to address the water with a rain tank buried in the ground that is going to receive runoff from downspouts and then infiltrate the water into the ground, that rain tank needs to be set back certain distances from the building, and I believe from driveways as well, including pavers. Am I right on that, Dave?
Yeah, there's no setback for dry wells to driveways. Certainly there are permeable materials that can be used for driveways that have a required setback from a house foundation, but it would be difficult to, for a large building and also a large parking area on a lot to meet the town's water drainage retention requirements.
But you could put a rain tank underneath a paved parking pad. That just surprises me because of the compaction.
Yeah, I mean, they're designed to handle vehicle load, so that's possible.
Okay.
And not uncommon.
Can
Okay.
the parking spots be pervious surface, or are they all impervious?
They can be made permeable. Like I said, there are setback requirements and design requirements, but it's certainly feasible. Yeah, I know with the townhouses or condos over on Wall Street, I know that those all have first floor garages to handle the off-street parking requirement. And so there's a basement beneath and then 2 floors above, but most of that first level is garage space.
So it's an issue. We just don't know how challenging it would be, but it's something that will take some work for a developer to figure out.
Yeah, it would be challenging. I guess there's a water drainage variance if, there's something, that is proposed that's otherwise legal that can't meet the requirements of the town's ordinance for engineering purposes. So there's, I guess there's an appeals body that could consider cases if it wasn't possible to meet the strict requirements of the ordinance.
There's stormwater drain on Connecticut, right, or not?
There's no storm drains on, there's one close between Rosemary and Bradley. There's one inlet is the only one.
That's actually very significant. You think about that. Connecticut doesn't have any stormwater drainage.
Well, and as Dave noted, I imagine you would see a lot more requests for variances from the water drainage requirements with respect to workforce housing development.
Yeah. All right, but that then puts it back in our control.
Yes.
Okay. Urban forest. Any other questions about stormwater at the moment? Okay. Urban forest.
So yeah, with respect to the urban forest, a permit is required to remove a protected tree on private property. And that's a tree that's 24 inches in caliper, measured at 4 feet above the ground. So the town has to approve removal of those types of trees. And the criteria that the town council reviews and that type of application relates to the maturity of the tree, its desirability based on its species and other aspects. You can consider in that context whether removal is necessary for development, whether the applicant proposes reforestation anywhere. But generally speaking, if you're considering a request for removal of a champion tree, you start out with the position that this ordinance is in place to protect these types of trees based on the benefits of the environmental benefits of the canopy. So, it's not a automatic approval by any means.
I would suppose that for the kind of massing that's required for multifamily housing, that for a lot of these lots, that's going to involve taking down some trees.
Yeah, and the parking area as well. If you look at some of the diagrams that the county has produced, almost the entire rear yard of these diagrams is the parking lot. So,
okay.
Imagine a five car parking lot on a 12,000 square foot lot. Doesn't leave much room for trees.
Any other questions about that ordinance?
Walls and fences? What about walls and fences is the question.
So those are subject to building regulations and would likely be limited under 2509 to units, buildings up to 4 units.
Okay. Curb cut. What's the ordinance there?
Yeah, so that's in chapter 4, and in my opinion, that's not a building regulation. It does not derive from the authority granted by section 2509 of the land use article. The town has the right and duty under the Maryland Constitution and the Home Rule Amendments and its charter to regulate the rights of way for the benefit and use of the public. And so our code provides if someone wants to create a new curb cut, a new driveway apron in the public right of way, that approval is required from the town. And the town's able to consider such things as whether a curb cut already exists somewhere that's serving the property, the width that's proposed in order to preserve on-street parking, whether a tree must be protected, whether the intersection proposed, whether the apron proposed is too close to an intersection, which would render it unsafe based on traffic. So the council has broad discretion to determine the appropriateness of driveway aprons.
But we do have an obligation to, no, we can't.
No, case
can't
law
prevent
does
somebody
provide.
we cannot, we have to allow a curb cut somewhere.
Correct. Yes, but in the case of a corner lot, case law provides that if they've got reasonable access on one street, you don't have to grant it on another street. Ultimately, the right of ingress and egress exists, and you have to grant it somewhere, but you do have discretion to determine the appropriate location and size.
Got it. Okay.
And for the purposes of curb cuts on state highways, any connection to a state road requires a state permit as well. So typically, when there's a request for a new curb cut on a state road, we've deferred to their engineering review, but we do look at our code requirements as well.
Right. I know for Corso, we went through that very, very extensively when they changed their curb
there've been a
cuts.
few on new curb cuts on Bradley that SHA has approved for circular driveways and for new connections.
Okay. All right. Dean? Yeah. Yeah, well, or you can ask and we'll repeat it.
In the CTA, it says you're allowed one driveway per workforce housing development. Does that mean only one curb cut? Because we allow circular driveways on the major streets, which means two curb cuts, but it's still one driveway.
Okay. The question for the record was the ZTA refers to one curb cut for workforce housing, but one driveway, sorry. But would we consider that as, would we consider it'd be okay to have one driveway with two curb cuts so that it could be circular to facilitate the traffic flow through the property, right?
Yes, I believe that would be deemed one driveway under the town ordinance, and the town does exempt the one curb cut per lot restriction to Connecticut Avenue, East-West Highway, and what's the third one, Dave?
Bradley Lane.
Bradley, thank you. Yeah.
Oh, exempt. So in other words, we would be willing to have two curb cuts with one driveway on those major boulevards. Okay.
Right.
Which
yeah, because
actually really is important for safety. That's
yes.
pretty.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments from? Okay. I guess what I would ask, Carlo, if you can work with Dean and sort of think about these three. And again, I don't have any particular specific agenda, but I just feel like we need to know more. And I think the stormwater one is what really is interesting in terms of how our ordinance would work with larger multi-family housing. And I don't know if it's a matter of the language of the ordinance or if just trying to sort of figure out in advance what a developer would do or be able to do in respect to complying with our ordinance as written, given part. Maybe to Dave's point, maybe it ends up forcing all parking to be interior and the first floor of every condo ends up being a garage. I don't know. But or else, and I don't know whether the fact that you could make the driveways or the parking spaces permeable, whether that makes a big difference or not. But I think just trying to get a handle on how that ordinance will work with larger housing. That's really the most general question I can think of. But I think we want to understand that and be prepared for what might come down the pike.
And also if parking is going to be placed, surface parking, and utilizing permeable parking, and given just someone's backyard or whatever side yard is going to be facing a bunch of cars, do we use the urban forest part of it to create opportunities for vegetative screening that also aligns with the urban forest ordinance? I
Right.
don't know.
Okay, you have your fall's work for you. I knew you were to some extent. I didn't know how much you were working on them, but that's good to hear you. I'm pretty, you ought to go up to the mic then, Dean. Dean?
And you were talking about whether a corner lot would be eligible for workforce housing, depending on whether it has frontage on Connecticut, et cetera, or on the side street. What if it has frontage on Connecticut? Then what sort of limit is there in terms of it combining with the lots behind it? Because this would not be a through street situation. There would be multiple lots before you get to the through street. So do you want to allow 3 lots, 2 lots behind it to be consolidated with that forward facing lot?
Deedon, why do you think that the lot consolidation, why would you think that would even be, because those would be ineligible lots to begin with? The interior lot.
But if you combine with the front lot, then they're not ineligible anymore.
Well, it does say in there is some language about a lot cannot be combined with an eligible lot cannot be
ineligible
combined
lot.
with an
Okay,
ineligible.
okay, I
But just to be clear, what we're looking to do, there are 2 points about this. One is we want stronger language in the SRA.
Right,
Defining it clearly that you cannot combine a lot on a corridor with an interior lot, full stop.
right.
Secondly, is the issue that Ron was alluding to, which is there's uncertainty about how a corner lot might be defined over time. And we want
Mhm.
clear language that does not permit that to rotate, that
Right,
orientation to
right.
be switched. So that we know that a corner lot that is not eligible today will never become eligible.
And is there language in there currently, let's say a builder buys the front facing Connecticut lot and then buys the lot behind it on, I don't know, Aspen or whatever, and just goes ahead and combines them, doesn't come in for workforce housing. And he waits a couple of years and then he comes in for workforce housing. Is there anything to stop that? That's in there?
So it would be, you think it'd be a 2-step process?
2-step process, right?
Let's ask Ron that question. They couldn't combine lots today, could they?
No, because as the ZTA is currently written and as reflected in Andrew Friedson's instruction letter to Legislative Council, it was always his intention that consolidation could only occur along a corridor and you couldn't creep inward.
I guess what Deedon is focusing on is it specific just to workforce housing? Or in other words, is there some broader umbrella that a developer could be under to combine a lot front and back without fitting within the workforce housing
Oh,
process?
Can I give an
oh,
example?
wow. Oh, wow. Yeah, no,
If I
no,
buy-
that might be another loophole.
Yeah, if I buy the
Mhm.
property behind me, and now I have those 2 lots, can I combine them right now?
Okay, so technically, yes, but it would still require planning board approval. And the town would have the ability to comment under mandatory referral. I would need to look into that in greater detail, but my general answer would be it's technically possible, but the planning board is supposed to look at the compatibility of the resulting lot. And hopefully they would say it's not compatible in the R60 zone to do what you're doing because you're creating an anomaly. But technically, I think it would be possible. And yeah, that might be another loophole because then under the SRA, years later, or even months later, the developer could argue that that prior assemblage is now an eligible lot for workforce housing. I can't think of any prohibition in the ZTA against that, but I'll look at that further.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Unless is it, you under no circumstances can you combine an eligible lot with an ineligible lot, even if you do not intend to build workforce housing.
Well, see, I think without the date limit for what is an eligible lot, I
Right.
don't think some would be prohibited in that instance.
I
Okay.
guess the point
Because
is that-
eligibility can change over time currently.
Right. I guess what you're relying on is that if you're just trying to combine two lots for market-based housing purposes, then the primary consideration should be compatibility. With workforce housing, it is no longer in the major factor. It's, you're trying to incentivize the development of workforce housing. So they're permitting consolidation, one presumes, more easily if the result is going to be with workforce housing than would otherwise be the case if it was just market rate, effort to put together some lots.
Correct. Because in Chapter 50 now, which is the county code on subdivision, there is criteria that the planning board is supposed to apply when considering subdivision and the creation of new lots. And is the resulting lot similar in size, shape, orientation, frontage as to other lots in the neighborhood? But the workforce SRA modifies that by saying, here's an additional planning policy that sort of overrides the other criteria.
Right. Okay. All right. More to think about. Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Alex?
I just just a quick question. So the town's rules don't apply to buildings with, I guess, 5 or more units. And I guess I know we had a chart.
The town building
Rules, yeah.
rules,
And I think it was on our chart and I have not been able to call it up on my computer, but is there sort of a quick explanation as to what the rules would apply if the town rules don't apply? Is that on our chart? In other words?
Yes, Ron sent around a spreadsheet
Yes.
showing what happens.
Yes.
What flips basically on those
Okay.
building regulations.
And
to go from 1 to 4 units versus more than 4 units.
and I guess, were there things that people thought were quite significant? I mean, I was looking over them myself. Setbacks is okay. But the height I thought was here limited to 40. Is it always 40 feet?
The town.
Oh, the towns is lower. So the towns would apply to structures with 4 or less,
Right.
the 33. Okay, so that's the
Correct.
height.
Also, the FAR limit is very different.
Okay, yeah, the
Where
0.5
the town is at
versus.
0.5 versus
Okay,
1.25.
I see. Okay, I see the difference.
The side setbacks are not very different. They're very
Okay.
similar, but the
Okay,
rear yard setback is different.
okay.
But I do, because folks are potentially listening, is that even though the FAR is 1.25, because of the 40-foot limit on the buildings, it appears as though you can't ever reach 1.25. That it's like 0.77 or 0.8 or something
That's
like
good to
that.
point out. Thank you.
Mathematically, it can't happen because at the end of the day, the county still has its setbacks.
Right.
You have the 40-foot,
It's only 6 feet on the side.
but you're never going to get to 1.25. Even with the 40-foot, height
Yeah.
limit and the county setbacks, you're not getting anywhere close to 1.25.
Well,
Okay.
You can look into
We
it.
could look into that, yeah.
All right, good. Well, thank you all very much. Irene,
So-
thank you for the letter.
Just real quickly to address the loophole that Deedon found, I think we could say something like the board must not approve an assemblage of lots for purposes other than workforce housing, except if a binding element is placed on that subdivision approval, preventing that lot from being used for workforce housing in a future application or a future assemblage. I'll work on language and send that over.
Yeah, we'll have to look at it. Okay. I think we're spent tonight. Our heads are hurting.
Man.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Joy, for joining us, and Eric and Deedon, really appreciate it. Mary, thank you for staying with
Thanks,
us
all.
and giving your question. Thank you all very much. Okay, good night.
Night.
Bye.